Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. Billy's first wife, Elizabeth, was the source of his inspiration for many years. Though he would be divorced from her 2 years after getting married, some of the songs were attributed to the agonies of picking up the pieces of a troubled love triangle. Because the traumatic life experience I had just been through, I thought this was fertile ground to write about. Billy went to see The Godfather in 1972, and after coming out of that movie, he was determined to do whatever it takes to succeed and take care of Elizabeth and her son. Al Pacino goes through this complete transformation of being this nice guy, Marine hero, to becoming a mafia chieftain. So I said to myself, I have to do whatever I have to do. We're going to get out of here. We're going to go back to the East Coast. I'm going to get an attorney. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to make this right. Columbia Records made Blood, Sweat, and Tears very radio-friendly, and even Janis Joplin came out a little less raunchy and authentic than she really was. But above all, Columbia was a label of Bob Dylan. For that reason alone, Columbia appealed to Billy. Here was this raspy singer who got no radio play, had no hit singles, had nothing going for him except that he was Bob Dylan. And they had the sense to see what that meant. They stayed with him and put out those records, and he's ended up being the most important solo artist of our time. To this day, Dylan is still at Columbia Records, and that said to me was, this is a career-oriented label. Over time, Columbia would end up being the right choice for Billy. They stuck with him through 5 albums that weren't hits. Even Piano Man, which was perceived to be successful, barely dented the charts at first. The Stranger in 1977 would be his first commercially impressive album. Amid all these positive reactions to Piano Man, Elizabeth and Billy were still sitting at the kitchen table wondering how to make ends meet. Not only did Billy's earnings barely trickle in, he had made less than $8,000 on the album by 1978 accounting. They also struggled to shake money loose from Columbia for promoting and touring. Then, as now, if you had a successful debut album, and Piano Man was regarded as a debut, even though it had been preceded by Cold Spring Harbor and the earlier releases with The Hassles and Attila, you would be under great pressure to get the second one out quickly. This is why people talk about the sophomore slump, says Billy. You spend your whole youth building up material, crafting that Bildungsroman that tells your story. And then, in the middle of abruptly finding success and crashing in Holiday Inns, of being a band leader and wondering when the checks will arrive, you have a couple of months to write 10 or 12 heartfelt new songs. By the way, remember, the songs about how much the road sucks have already been done, and nobody wants to hear them. Nonetheless, Billy had one song in that vein, and it's probably the one song on Street Life Serenade that would still be regarded somewhat fondly, The Entertainer. The Entertainer came partly out of the experience of seeing Piano Man downsize from the original 6-minute album cut to a 3-minute single. It's weird and sad that that's how it has to be, but the thing is, it was necessary for it to be a hit. It's as if the people will never know the true beauty, but only the punches. I am the entertainer. I've come to do my show. You've heard it. You've heard my latest record. It's been on the radio. It took me years to write it. They were the best years of my life. It was a beautiful song, but it ran too long. If you're gonna have a hit, you gotta make it fit. So they cut it down to 3:05. Billy stated writing about the record company cutting his song down probably did not help him with the top managers at Columbia Records. At the same time, it is a summary of the education that any performer receives. I am the entertainer, and I've come to pay my price. The things I did not know at first, I learned by doing twice. But still they come to haunt me, still they want their say. So I've learned to dance with a hand in my pants. I let 'em rub my neck, I write 'em a check, and they go their merry way. When Billy performed this song before an audience, he would often point out that the narrator wasn't complaining about the rough life of a singer-songwriter. Compared to workers such as truckers and manufacturing workers, he had nothing to complain about. Even the relationship that stars have with their fans wasn't excluded from the song. Today I am your champion. I may have won your hearts. But I know the game. You'll forget my name. And I won't be here in another year if I don't stay on the charts. Aside from Entertainer, that album was a miss. Billy persuaded them to stop the bleeding and not release it in what had been a promising market in Australia. I'm actually convinced that my success in Australia was due to the fact that street life was held back there. Instead, Piano Man was followed up 2 years later by the Turnstiles album, and kept radio playing critical acceptance in Australia at a high level for him. Over the years, says Billy, my opinion of that album has persisted. Street life, to quote one of its lyrics, should be put in the back on the discount rack like another can of beans. As John recalls, I remember at one point Billy was saying how fed up he was with it all, and how long he had been at it and nothing was happening. Artie was definitely jerking him around, and Billy just felt like chucking it all and moving back to clamming or whatever he did out there on Long Island. And I said to him, I'll kill you if you do that. You've got a God-given talent. Perhaps because Billy sensed that he possessed just one financially rewarding skill in life, he renewed his commitment to the course he'd set on. I was not going to take another job. I was going to be a musician. That's my work. I recognized how corrupt and decadent, how larcenous his business was, but I just had to try to find the most straight-up people I could. In mid-1975, Billy sensed a restlessness in Elizabeth, seemingly the result of varied pressures she was feeling. She and John Small looked after Sean on a rotating basis, and the boy flew often solo, west to east and back again. During Sean's LA stays, since Billy was often on the road or simply too busy to stand as the boy's father figure, she took on most of the caretaking responsibilities herself. At the same time, Billy had his own set of pressures, the key one being an urgent need to build a body of songs that could serve him better in the studio than the last bunch had. Meanwhile, his unsettled management situation only added to the career instability he felt. He was sensing that he probably had kept John Troy on as manager longer than he should have. Billy had gleaned from those around him that John had to go. He had understood record promotion and was world smart. He also knew plenty of people in the music business, knew about radio, knew about retail. But Troy had filled the role more as a road dog commander in arms rather than a plugged-in pro. He had no credentials as a manager. A hallmark of Billy's work has been his ability to take his own deeply rooted emotions and universalize them. The effort of grinding to break through with a hit song and album would alienate Billy and Elizabeth. The relationship would finally crash in 1980, as would happen often in a career that is inseparable from his personal life. Billy, pugilist that he was, would stay on his feet, hoping the next round would win the day. Whatever happened later, Billy would never discount the role Elizabeth played in that period, how much hard work she did on my behalf, and the real love that existed between us. As he said in You're My Home, she saw the crazy gypsy in my soul as no one else could. Billy returned to New York, reshuffled the previous band members he had in California. Notable amongst the new players he brought was a bass player by the name of Dag Stegmaier, the Soyset native, 2 years younger than Billy, whose dad was a professional horns player. He had been part of a high school band that had a cluster of talented guitarists. The gang included Russell Javar and Howie Emerson, who had backed eminent folksies Eric Anderson and Johnny Mitchell. They were in the right place at the right time to team with Billy, who was still finding his way back into the New York scene. After all the stress and confusion of the producer search, says Billy, I ended up producing Turnstiles myself, back in New York with a few overdubs at Caribou. I didn't know how to translate it into the technology. I didn't know what was available. I didn't know how to get a drum sound. I didn't know how to EQ anything. The 8 tracks of Turnstiles at 34 minutes and 18 seconds made for a pretty lean piece of product, but most of the 8 songs are keepers. Half of them concert staples. An argument can and has been made that this album is an indispensable time capsule, not just of Billy in the mid-1970s, but of that moment in pop music. The octet of songs insightfully evokes life at a time when America's leisure class and those who aspired to it somehow turned inward. Street Life Serenade in 1974 and Turnstiles in 1976 turned out to be disappointments, both to me and the label, says Billy. John Troy never could have written that out, but Elizabeth had just the right mix of fitness, manipulation, and the odd surprise move going for her. Possibly the most advantageous thing that happened with Elizabeth in her role as manager was that she developed a relationship with a new head of Columbia Records, Walter Yetnikoff. At the time, says Billy, it was real important for us. We were just running out of money, just barely making ends meet. And I had a band to pay. I had a road crew. We were becoming pretty well set as an organization, and we needed help from the record company, about 80 grand at the time. Elizabeth insisted Walter attend a New York area show, and as he recalls, my habit, then as is now, I watched the audience. And they were really jiving and shucking and bubbling. Something was going on here. And I saw Elizabeth afterward, and I said, you've got to keep this show on the road. There's something going on here. And she says, we can't. We're out of money. I said, who did you ask? She said, I asked business affairs. What did you ask for? She asked for 80 grand. I said, that's it? She said, yeah. They said no. I said, call them tomorrow. They'll say yes. There was all this bubbling under stuff that was going on, excitement that I don't think the record company had been aware of. We were getting a lot of support from college radio, progressive FM radio, and a live audience. Even the press was good. There was a renegotiation with R.T. Rip on his percentage. He still stayed in the picture, but Walter got back my publishing rights. Billy admitted to being fairly oblivious to the business side of his career. But he did start to notice how Elizabeth was representing him, and that she was not doing things in the firm, courteous way he preferred. The reports filtered in that Elizabeth was upbraiding business contacts and pulling punches. Though Billy knew that a manager was supposed to play hardball sometimes, it wasn't his style of doing business. He told her at various points, please, don't treat people like that. Don't fuck people over. The business arrangements certainly didn't help the marriage. Beyond the stresses of her dispensing the orders, Billy was on the road a lot and only in his mid-20s. Inevitably, the two spent a great deal of time apart. She developed her own social circle, while Billy hung out with his gang, the band. Things also became strained between the two couples because, while Billy struggled not to act like a rock star, Elizabeth embraced that life immediately. It became apparent that she felt she was entitled to her fun, loved moving in circles with celebrities and the record company executives like a big shot, says Billy. I just wasn't comfortable with that. The couple had married for richer and for poorer, so she had every chance of ultimately sharing his assets 50-50. At the same time, Billy respected her effectiveness and her robust dialogue with the label. It probably didn't hurt that she got friendly with Walter Yetnikoff, says Billy. The rumors afoot that Elizabeth had gotten more than casually friendly with the exec would probably be ascribed to the casual sexism of the music business, which only made them more persistent. But Walter always denied it, says Billy, and he's the most shockingly honest person I know. I believed him. They didn't call Walter Velvel or the Wolf for nothing. Yetnikoff wrote in his memoir of getting a birthday greeting from Billy, which his girlfriend Boom Boom stashed in a male stripper's jockstrap and fished out with her teeth. Happy 50th birthday, Walter, it read. You redefine insanity. That said, Walter's denial is clear. Nothing ever happened, he says. I didn't think she was that attractive, number one. Number two, I'm really gutsy and ballsy, but you think I'm going to start with a major artist's wife? I'm not that gutsy. I'm not that crazy. And I always stay away from trying to entangle personal and business. As Walter recalls, Elizabeth was not averse to stoking jealousy on Billy's part. She would tell people, Walter has a very nice apartment. She was talking about leaving him at the time. Billy said, so why is she telling me this? I said, she's looking to piss you off for whatever reason. She wants to get even for something real or imagined. And I'm the one guy you really can't have a fight with, nor me with you, so therefore she's telling you it's me, and setting up this whole thing. So she's pulling your chain. I have no idea why. Yetnikoff remembers she had a little bit of a sadistic thing emotionally. Elizabeth took advantage of him, a little cold. I remember once he said, my feet are hurting. Elizabeth made me wear these shoes.